disorder. An obsession is a recurrence of senseless, intrusive, continuous anxiety producing thoughts and impulses. Compulsions are the attempt to ward off the obsessions with rigidly patterned irrational behaviors. It's almost as common as ADHD, and boys are twice as likely to have it as girls. If you remember the television show Monk, he was a wonderful example of obsessive-compulsive disorder. It may start at age 3 or 4. Peak onset is usually around 10. The symptoms are similar between adults and children. They really don't differ. Blocking the compulsive responses can often trigger violent reactions. They have to be able to do what they think they have to be able to do. Parents report they have to cooperate with compulsive rituals to placate the child. They're bewildered, angry that the child can't stop doing these ridiculous things, and the rituals can take over home life. Okay, oppositional defiant disorder and conduct disorder. Looking back at my first teaching experience, I realized the kids that we called the hardcore baddies probably had conduct disorder or oppositional defiant disorder. These are tragedies in the making early on to threats to society later. Childhood disobedience that grossly violates acceptable behavioral norms. More boys than girls are diagnosed with this, and it can display as young as 3 years of age. The core symptoms, wait a minute. Here we are, sorry. Okay, conduct disorder. The core symptom is physical aggression and cruelty. And oppositional defiant disorder is inflexibility. These kids are doing things that just seem beyond understanding, and apparently for no reason. These kids tend to be, you might find them setting fires, creating damage, major damage, hurting animals. Co-occurring disorders, ADHD, very, very typical, and many of them also have depression. The observations from home, the parents angry because the child won't obey or cooperate, embarrassed because their children is doing unimaginable things. Their child is doing unimaginable things. Great worry about danger to their siblings or other children. Really can't take their child anywhere. And plus the child is home an awful lot because they get suspended from school. The last diagnosis we're going to talk about is schizophrenia. It is the most devastating mental illness in that it truly causes a loss of self. It's rare in children, 1 in 40,000 for people under 15 show signs. The defining sign is the slow, gradual emergence of psychotic symptoms and their persistence after the onset. In some cases, you see developmental delays early on during the onset in motor and speech language, poor attention, memory, and decision making. It's rare before 5 years old, and that differentiates it from autism, because autism will usually surface earlier than that. So with childhood schizophrenia, usually won't show up before 5 years of age. It causes significant abnormalities in the brain and disruption in brain development. Okay, adult schizophrenia is much more common. Typically, the onset is 18 to 25. 1 in 100 adults will be diagnosed with this. And again, the symptoms: weight loss, agitation, withdrawal, odd beliefs, odd sensory hallucinations, could be intense religiosity and beliefs. And what happens is a high-functioning teen will suddenly fall apart. They're just no longer there. Observations from home: the child may say they're seeing things, hearing voices. They're not interested. They're just blank with little or no emotion. Okay, a word about medication. As David said, medication is tricky because our kids' brains are changing all the time. Such rapid development, and it's difficult to keep up with changes. One of the things that we encourage parents to do is to share with school, if their child is on a medication, what it is and what they should expect to see with it. And we hope that the school will be equally forthcoming about what they're seeing, because things change so rapidly as they grow. And medication can have all kinds of other side effects that maybe you weren't really looking for. So if a child is on medication in school, it's very important to keep an open dialogue between the teacher and the parent, so we kind of all are on the same page in terms of what that medication is doing to the child. But always keeping in mind, teenagers are resistant to medication. And so another good reason to keep in touch is if you call and say, "Has he stopped taking his medication?" That might be the first warning sign that the parent has. Okay, now I would like to introduce Craig Sparazza, who's going to talk about a parent's perspective.
All right. Let's see. Do I have slides? Oh, there's my slide. Okay. Well, my name is Craig, and you'll see my son Rourke here in just a little bit. But our journey kind of started out pretty much from birth. He had some birth trauma from the placenta that didn't quite develop properly. So we kind of knew from the get-go that there were going to be, developmental delays, learning disabilities, but we kind of didn't really figure that the mental illness part was going to come in. But what I kind of like to do is explain to you a little bit about what it's like at home. I mean, you kind of see pretty much everything at school, but you don't see what the parents are going through. And so the one and only chart there, chart that I do have here, is in our class we teach. These are some of the typical stages that your parents are going to go through as they start to realize that their children do have a diagnosis, and that they are needing help. And I don't know if any of you have run into, I'm sure in some of your parent-teacher meetings, parents that are in denial about some of the behaviors and things that are going on, and I'm sure it's as frustrating for you as it is for the parents. But as you work through some of the initial stages, I'm going to look up here. When you first get a diagnosis, of course, everybody's kind of in shock. And if you're trying to interact with some of these parents at that particular stage, they're going to have certain needs, which we kind of listed up there, which if they're learning to just begin to deal with this and accept it, if you're going to talk about, getting skills and training and, letting go and some of the other needs that you see in some of the later stages, if you try to introduce those in the first stage, you're not going to have much success. They're not going to be receptive to, to that kind of assistance. So, basically, and it's in your monograph, it kind of explains it a little bit more detail, but you have to kind of accept wherever they are at that time and provide that kind of help when you do meet with them and talk to them about some of the behaviors and the issues that you want to try to address, as you're moving them through the grades. These were kind of roughly based off of Dr. Kubler-Ross's stages of death and dying, and if you'll notice some similarities between them. And so this is kind of normal human progression to a tragic event. And so as you kind of work through this and your children are growing and they're starting to get treatment, you've identified some of the problems and you're starting to get some positive results from therapy, then we start working through the different stages as parents. And so you can kind of, if you're lucky enough to have these these kids throughout their educational career, you're going to see some changes with the kids as well as the parents. Something to keep in mind too is that your kids are also going through some of the same stages. They realize something's wrong with them, but they're scared to death. And I think one of the things that was so frustrating for me as a parent was that I could kind of see the crash coming, and talking to the teachers and the school psychologists and counselors, and I said, we're losing him socially. He's starting to withdraw more. He's in the nurse's office almost every day. He's got headaches, stomach aches, never had a fever or anything. But I would say, probably at least 2 to 3 days a week, he was going to the nurse's office. Every morning, it was a major battle to get him out of the house. And we kind of felt that, well, he just didn't want to go to school. And we did some horrible things to try to get him up. Pouring water on him and stuff to get him out of bed because he wouldn't get out of bed. And he was that resistant to going to school because of the fear, I think, of failure, the fear of being teased and bullied, and the fact that he just really wasn't getting, he didn't feel like he fit in. And so we're pushing him out the door. He's trying to keep himself in the door. And at one point, we got into his 5th grade year, and of course we've been getting all the letters from the district, and your child has missed X amount of days, and it's against XYZ criminal code for missing all these, we're actually being threatened with legal action because we're having to push our kid out the door. And so we talked about the catch-22. Well, we were in the middle of that catch-22. And finally one morning he melted down and said, I can't do this anymore. I just can't do it. And he says, if you make me go to school, I will leave campus and I will walk out on the street and I will get hit by a car, and then you won't have to worry about me anymore. So that kind of started our first hospitalization, which lasted almost 2 months. And in which, of course, he's diagnosed with attention deficit and OCD. And so we thought, great, we got it fixed. We know what's wrong. He's on medications. It doesn't quite work that way. So, he kind of progressed. And unfortunately, right after that, he was in a really terrible accident, in a car accident. He got broadsided, suffered a traumatic brain injury. And it happened while they were on their way to the hospital to visit me, and I was in the hospital with some sort of chest pain. So it was not a good day for everybody. But so we kind of figured that could have been maybe some of the impetus for development of the bipolar disease, although in our family history there is some other bipolar and some other mental illness as well. So who knows? I think one of the other frustrating things too was when he first started out in school, like I said, we knew he was going to have problems. We got him in developmental preschool and he did well. We were in the Kyrene district. They started a brand new pilot program called the multi-age program. So they combined first, second, and third grade. And it was fast-paced. The younger students were meeting with the older students. They were like 20 or 30-minute modules, and they go to the next one. It was ideal for your students that have attention deficit disorders because it was hands-on, fast-paced. He thrived in that environment. The problem was funding kind of ran out, and these great programs oftentimes are the first ones to get cut. So he graduated from the third grade, but then went back into a traditional fourth grade. It was frustrating for us because he still had the attention deficit problems. And, we talked about the behaviors that you see at home was exactly the same thing. He would be really good at school, and he'd get home, and he'd be moody, and he'd be angry, and he'd be withdrawn, and then we'd have to, I call it the nightly homework dance. District policy at that age was 30 minutes to maybe an hour of homework combined for all of the classes. Well, after 3 hours, we still haven't gotten through the first class. Absolutely no learning had occurred. My wife and I ended up doing most of the homework for him. And then somehow between the dinner table and when he got to school, the homework would go missing. And this happened time and time again. And no matter how sophisticated of an organizational system that we had for him, we never could seem to keep track of his homework. Even though he was taking the tests in the class and doing well, he was passing all of his classes, but he was getting failing grades because he couldn't complete the in-class assignments, nor was the stuff that we were doing at home was ever showing up at school. So it was frustrating. He was doing the work, he was learning, and then he would end up spending his lunches in the principal's office kind of as a punishment because he didn't turn in his work, he didn't complete in-class assignments. So, all of this kind of went back to maintaining their self-esteem. And I think that's probably the most important thing of any of these students is how they look in front of their peers. And so, I think if you see them that are starting to withdraw and, they're starting to, change, start looking at what's going on in their life, what's going on behind the scenes, and that's when you start talking to the parents. I'm trying to see where else I was going to go here or there. We talked about actually, the things at home. I think one of the things that was difficult for us was when we got into the, I'm sure you guys all love these things, are the IEP meetings. And I'm sure you've had no angry parents come into an IEP meeting. We were one of them. And of course, it was the school's fault. We had to blame somebody. Of course, it wasn't us. I apologize in retrospect for some of the problems that we probably created as well-meaning parents. And I'm sure you have them too. So I know it's hard to be patient with us. But we're a scared bunch of parents because we can see what's going on with our kids. And it's the powerlessness that we have or that we feel that we can't control what's going on with them. And finding the right diagnosis, getting them into treatment, getting them to, is a long process. I mean, it's not, you can't just go to the doctor and get a diagnosis. And like I say, these kids are moving targets. What's normal, what's kind of variations of normal, what's illness, the lines are so blurred. And so we as parents, we need to kind of be a little easier on ourselves, but it's easy to blame the victim. And so oftentimes that's what happens. If you just get up, if you just do this, if you just do that, things will be okay. And it's not. And so we put a lot of unnecessary pressure on our kids to perform, and this kind of accelerates, I think, the progression of the illness. So my son has done remarkably well. He's had his trials and tribulations, and he'll describe a little bit of those to you here. But he's a brave man. He's gone through a lot, and so I'm going to turn it over to him because he's the star of the show. I'm just kind of I pay the bills, but that's about it. So Rourke, why don't you come up here and introduce yourself here and give them a little taste of what it's like to be a student living with some of these challenges. And you're the one they need to hear from more than anybody. So I introduced my son, Rourke. So.
All right, in case you haven't guessed, my name is Rourke, and I'm Craig's son. I'm 27 years old, born and raised in Arizona. I went through, like my dad said, through the Kyrene and Tempe Unified School District. I've had an interesting life, ups and downs, lots of challenges, lots of trials, and I've had some very inspirational people in my life to help me through it, which I'll get into later. But a little background on me. First most, I was born with an intrauterine growth retardation, or IUGR. Basically, the brain did not develop fully because of a part of the placenta died. So I was somewhat retarded, but I like to say very uniquely interesting. You know, because of this IUGR, it created learning disabilities in reading, writing, and speech. I also have Asperger's, which is a form of autism. I had to go through developmental preschool for 2 years, which I was diagnosed with ADD and started on medications. Yay, Ritalin. So, you know, I was started early with the nurse's office and, you know, having to have regimens through the school medical facilities and stuff like that, which was always quite interesting, you know, to be one of the only ones that go every day. Become great friends with the nurses, so that was the bonus. Like my dad said, I was started a multi-age program, and to go to Little Death, I had 3 teachers. It was in one building, centralized, where they're all like right next to each other, and they had a pod that connected all 3 of them. And it was called multi-age, where all the students the first, second, and third graders all interacted with each other, and they were assigned different modules or classroom assignments where we would go to different teachers, one of the 3 for either reading, writing, math, science. We did do projects and stuff, and we even had times where as we became a 3rd grader or 2nd grader, I can't remember, we met with 4th and 5th graders and did outside projects like macaroni, you know, picture frames and stuff like that. But it was one thing that my dad did say, I do have to agree, it was fast-paced, very hands-on, and I flourished. I was such a great blending person that I could work with any team, you know, so I was like one of the loved ones. But, you know, it happened to be after you graduate from 3rd grade, they had a little graduation ceremony, and the teachers think about who you are as a person and how you've done over the last 3 years, and they give you a gift to, you know, accommodate your personality. Mine had to be a blender. I wonder why. 4th grade was something new for me because I haven't been in like a full mainstream class yet. But the one thing that inspired me was first when I got to meet the teacher, his name was Mr. Legal, he went ahead and had spelling trophies for all the students made out. And every week we would have a spelling bee. And if you won the spelling bee, you get a trophy. Well, that always kept me interested, but I never got past the first or second round. But one of the great things about fourth grade was I had a very good teacher who really took his time to get to know the students and really find out what's going on with them. After I was crying one day, I was trying to hide it coming into the classroom, he kind of pulled me aside and asked me what was wrong. Well, I just got defeated and basically not picked for flag football. So, because I couldn't throw very well. So, every day for about an hour, once a day, every week, or one day a week, I should say, one of the other students taught me how to throw and catch a football. So, and I actually got a grade for it, which was a bonus. But this was just more for this, than just teaching me how to throw a football. It was teaching me fine and gross motor skills. And, I have to say he was really thinking outside the box and saw an opportunity to, improve my social and physical skills in a fun way. My downtrend started when Mr. Legal got sick and had to leave and we had subs. Because of the subs and the subs that we had weren't very nice. And a couple of them actually called me a retard, straight up in front of the class, and because I had an IEP. So that's when a lot of the teasing and bullying started, because I was different. I was special. I was failing academically and couldn't have it. Like my dad said, absences, trips to the nurse several times a week, try to go home, faking to being sick to the point where my parents would give in, to me, faking it and take me to the doctor. Well, I couldn't fool the doctor. So off to school I went after the doctor's appointment. My first mental breakdown, me and my dad have a little disagreement about how this happened. How I remember it was I had a speech therapy session, and I had to miss it because of a dental procedure. I can't remember what I was getting done. And I remember driving up Country Club over the 60, and back then they didn't have the big safety gates, grates, so people couldn't fall over or anything. And I felt just depressed, and I wanted to jump out of the car and go over and fall to the 50 feet and go to hit the freeway and possibly get hit by another car. But that confused me because I was only 12 and I never felt that way before, so I never really understood why. So I pondered on it, and on the way home I told my dad that I wanted to die. Well, of course, this is what no person or adult really wants to hear from a child, especially a parent, is that their child wants to die. So first hospitalization up, I was in there for almost 2 months, and then not even a couple weeks after that, being home, my dad went in the hospital for chest pains, and we were broadside on the way to see him. The bad part, my mother, who is a nurse practitioner, rolled up on the scene of accident and had to help, and broke down herself and suffered some mental illness. I was out for the rest of the 5th grade, and they decided, even though you're already failing and barely even able to graduate, we'll just pass you and send you on to another school district or another school. We don't want to deal with you anymore. So I was on crutches and walkers, needed extra time between classes, and because of that, there was more stigma attached to me, and bullying and name calling and not very nice teachers, because I had to disrupt class, packing up and leaving, and then they had to get back in order the class because they were all upset that I was leaving early. I felt really singled out because I didn't have very many friends. You know, everyone I tried to be friends with would just barely talk to me and push me away. Or, you know, as soon as I walk away, start calling me names. So I decided to try and fit in and try to play one of the most